Hello, my name is TAJEDDINE. My project is titled Relationality and the Fragment, and it explores how fragmentation can move from being understood as loss into becoming a design strategy that produces relationships, spatial tensions, and new ways of inhabiting a site. The project is located on the Najjar building in Sanaya. This quote by Gaston introduces the idea that continuity can be constructed through fragments. Just like a line is made of points, space can be composed of discrete elements that together produce a larger experience. This idea helped me shift my understanding of fragmentation from something broken into something that can actively construct space. Rodolphe Gachet, interpreting Schlegel, explains that a fragment is never complete or isolated, it exists through relations, tensions, and plurality. So instead of seeing fragments as separate pieces, they become dependent on each other. Meaning is not inside the object itself, but in the relationships between elements. In this sense, fragmentation produces a field, not an object. The whole is not fixed, it emerges through distance, orientation, and interactions between parts. Void becomes just as important as solid. It is not empty, but a space where relationships are constructed. So the key idea is that the fragment does not represent the whole, it activates it. The whole only exists through the continuous interactions between fragments. In my conceptual model, I explored fragmentation through spatial separation, suspension, and layering. Fragments are not aligned or continuous. Instead, they create tension through distance and misalignment, while the void becomes the main spatial condition. During the site visit to Sanaya, I observed that the site already operates as a fragmented field. Movements overlap between pedestrians, animals, and activities, creating a space defined by interactions rather than order. At Radio du Liban, fragmentation appears through enclosure and isolation. At the National Library, fragmentation is softer, spaces are open and connected through light and movement. And in Sanaya Garden, fragmentation exists through dispersed activities and informal flows. So the site itself is not unified, it is relational. This photomontage represents that condition. I fragmented both the building and the ground, breaking their continuity. The elements are suspended and discontinued, creating a strong void between them. This produces a spatial conditions like rupture, instability, and vertical tension. From this, I understood that architecture on this site should not try to unify everything, but instead work with gaps, thresholds, and in between spaces. My research question is, how can fragmentation and environmental systems transform the Najjar building into a dynamic spatial field that shifts between performance, habitation, and ecological infrastructure over time? From my research, the site is constantly changing through time and occupation. Space is experienced through movement and sound. Fragmentation already exists in Beirut as incomplete or interrupted structures. Voids are active spaces, and environmental systems like rain and seasons can transform how the space is used. So instead of designing something fixed, I wanted to design something that changes. In my analysis, I focused on movement flows, intersections, and changes in elevations. The site is not experienced as one continuous path, but as a sequence of transitions. This directly informed how I designed circulation in my project. I propose a DJ dwelling on the Najjar building where fragmentation creates a relational field rather than a single mass. Fragments are distributed across the roof and connected through voids and thresholds. These spaces host performance, living, and ecological systems. Water collection and storage are integrated, allowing the architecture to transform over time. Movement through the project becomes sequential and immersive, shaped by sound, elevation, and transition. In my first draft model, I was exploring fragmentation mainly through separation and stacking. The fragments were more independent, and the focus was on how they could create tension through distance and vertical layering. However, the relationships between them were still quite limited, and the system was not yet fully integrated. In the second model, I began to introduce stronger connections between fragments, especially through circulation and transitional elements. This is where I started thinking about movement as a sequence and how users would navigate between spaces. The idea of void as an active space also became clearer. This development led to my final model, where fragmentation is no longer just formal, but becomes performative and environmental, integrating program, movement, and ecological systems. The fragments are not placed randomly, they are carefully distributed across structure to create different spatial conditions, including open, enclosed, elevated, and transitional spaces. Each fragment has its own identity, but it becomes meaningful through its relationships to others. Circulation is not linear, it is fragmented, requiring the user to navigate between levels, directions, and thresholds. This creates moments of compression and release, exposure and enclosure, making the experience more dynamic and immersive. The hydrosolar lift is a vertical system powered by water and solar energy. Rainwater is collected through filtration surfaces and stored. In summer, solar energy activates the system, so circulation is not mechanical, it becomes environmental. The stage is directly connected to the system. When water is stored, it acts as infrastructure. When conditions change, it transforms into a performance platform. So the same elements shift between function and experience. In the annotated model, spaces are distributed rather than enclosed. The make area acts as a DJ booth. Rest and eat areas are open and social. The sleep area is more enclosed and private. Ecological elements include bird platforms and water filtration surfaces. So the project supports both human and non-human occupations. Fragmentation here is not a condition of incompleteness, but a strategy that generates relationships, movement, and transformation, allowing architecture to adapt, interact, and continuously redefine itself.